Welcome everybody. I'll maybe just start talking, and I think a few people will be filtering in as we go. My name is Melody Morell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cornucopia Institute. I'm so glad that you could all make it to our Organic Egg Scorecard webinar today. It's very exciting. We had a huge response. Some of you on this webinar today are brand new to us. Some of you have followed us for a long time, and some of you have been financial supporters in the past or present. And we thank all of you for being here, and we thank you particularly for your support. With your help, we've been able to put an organic investigator on the ground this year, which is hugely exciting. We've updated our scorecards, and we have created a print version of the Organic Egg Scorecard, which I'm incredibly excited about, and we have had a lot of interest in, unprecedented interest, and we've done the biggest print run that we've ever done in our history on this scorecard. So thank you again. We're lucky today to be joined by Nicole Vitello, who is one of our board members. She's been with us for a little over a year now, and she brings a great deal of passion and know-how to this work. I'm so thankful, Nicole, that you could be with us here today. I know that you're really busy, so maybe you want to say a few words.
Thank you for the introduction, Melody. Yes, my name's Nicole Vitello. I've been at Equal Exchange for about 15 years now. For folks that might not know, Equal Exchange is a worker-owned cooperative based in Massachusetts that's been around since the mid-'80s, sort of challenging trade and trying to connect small farmers with products like coffee, tea, and chocolate. And I work in the produce side, bananas and avocados, with consumers here in the US. So I was also, before I came to Equal Exchange, an organic farmer for 10 years in Rhode Island. I grew mixed vegetables. And that's really when I came into contact with Cornucopia, gosh, back in the 90s and early 2000s, as a watchdog organization that I felt was really representing my interests as a farmer and allowing me to, help educate myself and the people that were associated with my farm and my community about what true organic is. And the small farmer missions of Cornucopia and Equal Exchange are very aligned. So I count board service as an important part of anybody's life, whether you can be on a board. I highly recommend it. Any type of board, particularly a board for an organization about something you're passionate about. It's a great way to, both meet interesting people and do meaningful work. And I'm very proud of to be on the Cornucopia board and to be here today speaking with you all. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Nicole. Much appreciated. Now to the main event. Kestrel Bertram JD is our policy director and has worked here for just a little under 8 years. Their background is in animal science and law, which makes them pretty nearly the perfect person for this role. And in the context of this discussion that we're having today on organic eggs, I'd like to point out that their dedication to animal welfare and soil health is really high. They're very exciting to work with. I'll let you take a turn, Kestrel.
All right, welcome everyone. I just wanted to get started here with a brief overview of our scorecard and kind of the highlights there and what we're trying to do with these scorecards. So first and foremost, here's my email information if folks have any questions after the webinar. And you can also just email the Cultivate inbox and that will get to me. So our scorecard is specifically for organic eggs. And this graphic here is from the United Egg Producers, which is a whole egg trade organization. And I think these numbers are a little startling. So just for background context, only 5.8% of all laying hens in the US are organic. Note that organic is slotted under cage-free because all organic hens are cage-free. But note that this almost 66% of laying hens in the US are in cages, battery cages, and crowded and overall just that's kind of the picture we're looking at here. So when we're talking organic, we're saying it's just a fraction of the industry. So these are battery cages here, just for a visual. People have probably seen media on this. There's a lot of evidence that this is extremely difficult for the animals. It's challenging, it's low welfare. There are states that are moving away from this production, but this is still the norm in laying hens. So when we're talking organic, that's the small fraction. And this is what our scorecard criteria are based on. So our scorecard has evolved over the years to emphasize things that are very important for laying hen welfare. So quality of outdoor access, how much space they get both indoors and outdoors, how crowded their flock are. And again, flock size is the hen's social group. And just like humans, they have a social group that if it's really big, it starts to sort of break down, and they like smaller groups. Alterations refers to things like beak trimming and other physical changes that are done to the hen. We talk about add-on labels in the scorecard. So that's your certified humane, your real organic project, certified regenerative, all those are taken into account in the scorecard. How they deal with chicks, how they're committed to the organic label. And some of these are subjective based on our deep research and investigation. So our idea of what is committed to organic label may be different than someone else's, but our idea is someone who is transparent, someone who is dedicated to animal welfare, someone who goes above and beyond the organic standards and is also concerned about environmental impacts. So just right off the bat, another big important piece of our scorecard is we're always looking to what is the best for the hens, because what is best for the hens translates directly to what is best for the consumer as far as nutrition, as far as animal welfare, as far as just health and safety, and also for environmental safety. So really you can use animal welfare as a benchmark for all these other things that are important. And for laying hens, it's especially true because they are omnivores. And this slide is essentially to say they are omnivores. So I have, they eat vegetation, they eat invertebrates, they eat, usually all laying hens in the US pretty much eat a mixed feed as well that is given to them for calories that is usually high in corn and soy, but there are other options for that. So you'll see in our scorecard, we often have data about if those hens are eating something unusual, like, or different, like lentils or beans or homegrown grains or cereals. And then of course, we want the hens to be feeding on fresh vegetation as well. They're omnivores who are made to forage outdoors and are thrive when they do so. So when we're talking about industrial organic compared to authentic organic, this is kind of what our scorecard is getting at, essentially. So the ones and twos on the scorecard are industrial organic. This is a organic facility, which you'll see in the few slides that go through here are very different. And the way you can tell industrial organic from authentic organic will become pretty clear. Industrial organic has large flock sizes. The barns are fixed and huge. The outdoor space available to them is smaller than the indoor space. And sometimes it's not even authentic at all. So you'll see in future pictures, there are porches sometimes. And that is in comparison to what you think of as a pasture producer. So this is one of our 5 egg producers here. This is a mobile coop, and there's things you can notice about it. The birds are on fresh vegetation. They have feed outside. That's that little pipe thing on the ground there that's feed. They have shade, protection from the elements. These mobile coops are moved because the birds will eat everything in one area pretty quickly. Again, they're voracious little omnivores, so they do that. And again, here's another example of an even smaller producer who's also a 5 egg. This one has some mobile net fencing that they can move and mobile coops constructed out of trailers. really the 5 egg producers can do a variety of things and be really high welfare and very good for the environment. But you'll notice the industrial producers are all pretty similar. So on the right here, we have an example of a porch. We do not consider this authentic outdoor access. It is currently allowed under organic, although there are regulations in process to make this illegal. There is no access to vegetation, as you can see. There is no access to digging in the soil. The birds don't even really use these, as you can see. There's little doors, so a few birds will occasionally pop out, but it's not really enriching. Here's another example of an industrial organic producer. This particular producer does use porches, like was just in the last slide. And this is what we call a flat deck barn. So the things on the side are lay boxes, and they have feed and bedding, and they're packed in. So industrial producers have 20,000 and above per barn, typically. Quite a large flock. And just for comparison's sake, conventional producers have 150,000 or 200,000 birds per barn. So there's still quite a difference there. But those are the three sort of spectrums here. Here's another example of a mobile coop outdoors. This producer has pretty large flocks and is still able to maintain really good vegetation. Again, we have food and water outside. The birds have intact beaks. You can see that their feathers are sleek. There's no bald patches. These are all things we look for as indications of good animal welfare. Here's another example of an industrial organic barn. Now, this is what we call an aviary multi-level housing structure. And you'll see that noted on the scorecard as well, if we know that they have this. And typically this means that they put even more birds in one space, which, as you can see in this picture, they're quite crowded. Hopefully folks can see the feathers are don't look as healthy. They're a bit more ruffled up. The birds are so packed in here that even when there is little pop holes to an outdoor space, the birds in the back or on the top here cannot get outside. It's just impossible. They have to crawl over many of their fellows, and it's extremely stressful for them. Here's another example. So you can see there's lots of different variations here, but the variation is very minimal for industrial producers, whereas for the high level authentic producers, the variation is more significant, and you can see the difference just immediately. This one at least has pretty good lighting, but you can see they're still pretty packed in, and that's the feed and water there, you see. So another thing we look at is, are the birds outdoors protected from predators? Because that's one stressor that can impact pasture raised birds. One common thing we see with our authentic organic producers is they use dogs. And this is just a great way to make the birds feel secure outdoors, which allows them to forage freely. This is a young flock, so you can tell that they're just starting to lay based on their feather position. And I love this picture because you can literally see the birds socializing in the photograph and interacting with each other. Here's another example of a 5-egg farm. Most of these farms are family farms run by the people who have eyes on the birds every day. So they know their flock. They're able to respond immediately to illness or any concerns like aggression. They're able to have a more hands-on approach, which overall is better for animal welfare. Here's another example of that porch. I call these industrial producers kind of lawn producers, because they have beautifully manicured lawns, which ironically is not what you want to see, because chickens will peck and destroy vegetation as they feed. So if you're seeing a beautifully manicured lawn, that's actually a warning sign that it's not actually getting legitimate outdoor access. And these screened-in porches, the industrial producers will make lots of arguments that it's safer for them, that it's safer from disease, predators. that it's safer for consumers because they're not outside exposed to disease. But the reality is that research and producer feedback, it's the opposite. So if you have less crowding, less stress, the birds are much healthier and much more resistant to disease. Here's an example of what we kind of call a mid-sized producer. So it's possible to do legitimate outdoor access and still have large flocks. And this is a good example of that. So this is Egg Innovations Pasture Raised. These are still fixed barns, still very large, but look here, we have a bunch of birds outside. So large flock, still able to socialize, still able to forage. You can see where they are picking at the vegetation. So it's not impossible to scale up. And I think that's really important because it's difficult to feed all the consumers that we want to feed with, backyard 500 bird flocks. So having a few of these really good mid-sized brands is really beneficial. And they kind of prove to us that it can be done well. It can be done with high welfare. This brand and brands like it are usually 4 eggs on our scorecards, and we recommend them as well. And just a little plug here for consumer education. Chickens love shrubbery, they love forest. That's kind of where their ancestral instincts are from. So something to look for when you're looking at eggs is something called silvopasture. Silvopasture just means that the birds are raised in a forest or shrub ecosystem, and they do really well in that. And it's not necessarily always the best thing to have them out in a big pasture like you would cows. And so we really encourage this kind of production as well. And you will see this kind of production quite a bit with diversified farms who run different livestock through their forests. Just a little bit, all this data is on our printed materials and on our website. So if folks don't need to read all this, you can find it on our website as well. But we have a lot of detail onto the different labels you'll find on egg cartons. The third-party labels vary a lot in their reliability, and we always caution folks to be aware that the meaning of these labels can change at any time. And there is no outside check and balance. And some of these labels are more trustworthy than others, like they will put internal checks and balances on themselves. But to note that USDA Organic is the only label with federal production standards where the government is actually regulating. So the labels that we think are the best are Regenerative Organic Certified, Real Organic Project, and Animal Welfare Approved. And then there's a bunch of others. This is just a small snapshot of the labels that are out there. This is just an example of our Eggzine, which is our printed egg scorecard. I'm very excited to see that out there. Again, you can find a flipbook for this on our website and also can get a print copy. And I think they'll drop some information about that in our chat shortly. And my little spiel is done, so I'm happy to answer questions. Any questions that come in? So Liz Morris asks, what does the black organic seal mean exactly? So black is just you're allowed to have green or black. There's no difference. So if you see the organic seal, the certified organic seal, that means it's certified organic. And you can usually find the certifier on packaging too. So you can find those things. Lance asks, what kind of chickens are they mainly using? So it varies widely. And typically you do see different breeds used in organic than you do in conventional, as you could probably see from the pictures. There's 10 or 15 breeds, so I won't list them out here, but if you want to know the specifics, that's something you can email in about. Lucia asks, I was purchasing eggs with all the right labels and was therefore surprised to see that the company declined to participate in your survey. So our scorecard, we send out surveys and do independent brand research. So our scores are based on both that survey and our own research, but usually brands will score lower if they don't respond to the survey because of lack of transparency on their part, and just there are a multitude of reasons why people wouldn't do that. Sometimes they're just too busy and they don't do it. So not knowing the particular brand, I couldn't say, but essentially, those are the two main reasons. A lot of folks, especially the industrial organic brands, do not participate because there's no benefit to them, at least not yet. We're hoping that as consumers become more educated and ask more questions, that changes, because we can really change the marketplace as a whole the more we push brands to be aware. WD Holt asks, how would one go about encouraging a local pasture raised facility to become more deeply committed to the broader goals? Yeah, so we support really small local farms, and the best way is honestly to be a consumer of that brand and ask them to move towards that, and specifically ask them and tell them that you'd support them even if they have to raise their prices. So organic feed for chickens is quite expensive, and that often leads to a price increase for the consumer. But the organic feed in and of itself makes the eggs safer for consumer consumption and better for the environment, because the burden of pesticides on the environment is quite huge. So the best way is honestly just to say, hey, I will support you if you go organic. I will support you if you use organic feed. I will continue to buy your products. I will tell my friends to buy your products. We've seen that have the best results, honestly, better than us telling them they should. And it's usually the consumers who have that power. I have a question from Bob Levy about, why did Vital Farms get bumped from top status? They did not. So Vital Farms has always been a 4-egg. They are a mid-sized brand like Egg Innovations that's doing a good job at their level. So they do have legitimate outdoor access, and they're doing, they're doing a 4-egg job. Basically, they're a mid-sized brand, and we totally recommend getting Vital Farms or Egg Innovations if you have them available in your marketplace. Louisa asks, is it best to choose eggs marketed as pasture raised? I have purchased those before, but the egg yolks looks kind of pale yellow, not orange, and don't taste particularly fresh. Can I trust them? So there's kind of two questions in there. So pasture raised is interesting because there's no real federal requirements to ensure that those hens are actually outside on grass or under trees or anything like that. So we kind of say use caution with pasture raised. You need to do more research into that. A lot of organic brands will have pasture raised on them, and that in combination with organic is usually a good sign. However, it's not, you need to do more research with pasture raised. It may mean that the hens have outdoor access, but it's really poor. So I've seen brands that do give legitimate outdoor access, but there's absolutely no vegetation outdoors. So the second question about egg yolk color, I'm sure lots of people have. Egg yolk color is basically directly related to what the hen is eating. So a lot of times you'll see egg yolk color change depending on the season. When the hens are out on really fresh grass or fresh vegetation in the spring and early summer, that egg yolk will often be dark orange, and that's because of the carotenoids in that egg. Eggs will be paler in the winter if they're actually truly pastured because there's less fresh vegetation in the winter. So if you're seeing your egg yolk change color from the same brand throughout the year, that's actually a sign that they are actually getting legitimate outdoor access. And if it's the same year round, that's potentially a sign they're not. Again, you have to do more research. It's kind of one of those things that you need to investigate more. Unfortunately, you cannot go off egg yolk color entirely because it can be faked, unfortunately. So industrial brands have become wise that consumers are looking for like the dark egg yolk, and they can make that egg yolk dark orange or even like reddish colored by feeding the hens particular things in their bulk feed. So you can feed like red chili pepper flakes and things like that, and it will turn that yolk orange even if they're not getting any outdoor access. So in fact, you mentioned that the eggs don't taste fresh. I would probably go off that too. That's another concern. Where are they being shipped from? How old are they? It may be that they're sitting on a shelf for quite a while before you purchase them. Liz asks, the shell is somewhat soft and the yolk is lighter yellow. Is that an indication that feed is not the best? And the chickens are from industrial places. Not necessarily, Liz. If the shell is soft, that could be an indication that the bird is older, or it could be an indication that they're not getting enough calcium. So could be that the feed is not the best. Again, the yolk being lighter is due to the feed, but is not necessarily a sign that it's an industrial place. Yeah, the whole idea of I'm getting some questions about eggs being thin or fragile while some are thicker. That does have to do with how much calcium the hens are getting, and can be an issue of welfare as well, because hens are nowadays bred to lay basically 1 egg a day, and they need quite a bit of nutrients to do that, and that's why they have to have that extra bulk feed. That's why soy is often fed. So it's really important that hens get that feed, and if they're not getting it, it can result in a poor quality egg. Ricardo asks, what label should I be looking for eggs coming from free range, eating insects, worms, etc.? No grain hens. Are there really these kinds of eggs? So Ricardo, I would not be looking for no grain fed hens. So as we talked about earlier, chickens are omnivores, and natively they will eat cereals, seeds, grains, these more high carbohydrate feeds in the wild. And so it's actually appropriate for them to be eating the legumes, the grains, and things like that. And they, in fact, have a difficult time laying eggs and doing well on just pure outdoor access. It is possible, but to ask them then to lay an egg every day does start leaning into poor welfare. I suggest, if you really want to try that, you get your own backyard hens and have a nice compost pile for them to scratch through and try it. But you're not going to really find those kinds of eggs commercially. It's pretty much impossible to do that commercially, because they're asking for the hens to lay an egg every day. Betsy asks, can only small farms achieve 5 egg status? That's a great question. You'll see that there is still a fairly large range of size in our 5 egg, but pretty much everyone in this industry would call them all small farms. But everyone in the industry considers farms less than 220,000, not 200, less than 20,000 birds to be small. So here at Cornucopia, our idea of small, medium, and large is a little bit different than the major egg industry, where like normal and conventional is like 150,000 birds. That is not true in organic. So organic, the largest barns are around 40,000, maybe 50,000. So we're kind of skewing our scale based on what is true in organic and also what we find authentic organic. So there are some 5 egg producers that have several thousand birds in their flocks. And I would consider those medium size still based on our sort of spectrum. But based on what the USDA thinks, these are all small farms. Yes. Very, very round the bush answer, I know. There are some questions about specific producers. I may answer those at the end here, but specific producer questions, please write into Cultivate and we'd be happy to answer them. Because we do have like other data. And I will say that the egg scorecard is a living document. So we're constantly updating it. And we do rely on consumers helping us out here. So if there's an egg brand that's available at retail that you don't see on our scorecard, please let us know. We will get them on the scorecard. If there's an egg brand that you think should be on there and isn't, or has an inaccurate score on there, or hasn't responded to the survey, let us know. If you're willing to help us get them to answer the survey or participate with us, we'd love that as well. A lot of our brands that are participating now, it's because of consumers telling them, consumers and retailers, telling them, hey, we'd like you to participate. And we're having more people actually fill out the surveys than we ever have before because of that assistance. So we can really make a huge impact into organic transparency with consumer health. Some more comments about Vital Farms. For Margie, Vital Farms Pasture Raised Organic uses multiple farms for their eggs. Some of their boxes are poor quality than others. They don't seem to have good control over the farmers. Do you have any input? Yeah, so as a mid-sized brand, all the mid-sized brands use multiple farms to supply their eggs. So Egg Innovations is similar, Hanson Brook, all these are very similar. I haven't noticed poor quality in their organic eggs. Vital Farms does have like conventional production and organic production, and the quality could also just be due to the retailer and the age of them being on the shelf as well. So it depends on what you mean by poor quality. And I think that that's something that if consumers are concerned about poor quality, they should contact their retailers, because retailers pay attention to that kind of stuff quite a bit. Louisa asked, can we talk about Pete and Jerry's eggs? Sure. So Pete and Jerry's is another mid-sized brand who has been more transparent with us recently. They've had some issues in the past with buying eggs off the wholesale market, organic eggs off the wholesale market. And we've criticized them for that in the past, but they are under new management now, and we think they're doing a great job as a mid-sized brand. Again, they're like a 4-egg mid-sized brand. If you can get a 5-egg, we recommend it, but a lot of people don't have access to that, and 4 eggs we recommend them as well. One thing I'm really excited about with our new organic investigator is we're going to be visiting these farms more in person. And we've started that process of doing in-farm checkouts, basically. And we're prioritizing the mid-size and the large brands because they're more likely to have issues with transparency, more likely to have issues with integrity, just because of the size, the fact that they have multiple farms in the brand. So we're continuing to do checks, and we'll update the scorecard as we have more information too.
I want to add something here, Kestrel, just because I think some of our listeners might not know what it means to buy eggs off of the open market, and maybe you just want to speak a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a good intro to like talking about private label brands as well. So brands of all sizes, if they aren't able to meet like a quota or what they intended, they will sometimes go to like the open market and say, hey, who can supply us with these eggs that we want? And they will buy them typically for the lowest price they can get and then resell them as their own packaged product. This is common in like food production in every commodity type, so not just eggs. But that's a concern from our perspective because they have no real knowledge about how those eggs are produced. They may know that they're certified organic, like you can get their certificate, but they don't necessarily know if they're industrialized, where they're coming from. It's just kind of like buying it on open market. And this is actually what store brands or private label brands, they're kind of, those two terms are used interchangeably. That's what they do pretty much all the time. So they'll go to the open market and say, hey, we want to have a contract with someone who can give us the lowest price on these organic eggs that we can then repackage under our store brand and resell. So that's typically why we do not recommend store brands, because they're most of the time coming from industrial ag sources, because industrial organic can provide lower prices because of the economies of scale and other issues. There are some store brands, especially like local stores, that we found are getting eggs from good sources, because that's what's available to them locally, is like a decent source. But how does a consumer know that? It's very difficult to tell. And there's not a lot of transparency there among these store brands. So that's a concern. So that's why we look down on buying on the wholesale market. It's kind of a red flag for transparency. It's a red flag for like industrialization. We see authentic organic as the consumer knowing exactly where the egg came from and exactly what the production method was, and being really like having a closer idea of that food product that you're putting in your body and putting in your family's body. Diane asks, has there been any discussion about how organic can be more affordable with food prices rising? Really, really serious question. And I mean, that's really relevant to eggs right now, because I don't know about everyone else, but when I look at my local grocers, egg prices have been going up like $1 a year, it seems like, or more. And really good question. So this is a good place to say that and remind everyone that all the organic, even the industrialized organic, are typically better than conventional. So if you can't afford anything else, buying a store brand organic, buying an industrial organic that is not in a battery cage, you're still going to get the organic feed, which is a benefit to the environment, and it's a benefit to your family's health. They may not have great outdoor access, but they're going to be in barns of 60,000 instead of 200,000. So there's still some benefits, and those eggs are cheaper. Still not as cheap as those battery caged eggs. And that is a problem in our food system just in general, because unfortunately, the way our government subsidizes food production, they subsidize this industrial conventional production, making it falsely cheap. So it really comes down to like government subsidies. It comes down to how we do food in general in the US here. So if you're really concerned about food prices, that's something to be aware of when you're voting. It's something to be aware of when you're talking to retailers. It's something to be aware of in what kind of policies you support at home in your local states, in your local counties. There's no reason that organic food has to be this much more expensive than conventional. It's kind of a false expense, because organic food isn't subsidized, if that makes sense. So it's really important that farmers get paid. So we're not advocating for like organic food to be cheaper necessarily. We're arguing that food in general is kind of mispriced, and that everyone has the right to healthy, safe food, and we need to fight for that. Ali asks, have you received any pushback or threats from producers or companies to not cooperate with your scoring based on how they have been rated? Not going into too much detail there, Ali, but we absolutely receive pushback. And we're not too concerned about it, really, because what we're taking is information that we collect, from public sources in our investigation. Our scoring mechanism is like a analysis that we've created. It's subjective based on Cornucopia stances, and we do it specifically for consumer education. And we're watchdogs, so that's kind of the bread and butter of what we do here. And honestly, we're happy to have industrial producers cooperate with us. In fact, we encourage it. We don't guarantee that they're going to get a good score at all. We recently had an industrial producer, one of the first times respond to our survey. And I'm not going to name names here. If you really want to figure it out, you can go to our scorecard and figure it out. But that has been very helpful because we're getting information in the back end then as a watchdog, which then informs our policy work, which I do a lot of on the regulatory sphere, to fight for better regulations, to fight for better enforcement. So having industrial producers participate is important. And even if they're not going to get good scores on our scorecard, it's still a sort of a mark in their favor that they're transparent at a minimum. So we try and make that clear, that transparency is extremely important, and thank them for participating, even if they're not going to get a good score, essentially. And we honestly hope that the whole food system moves towards that producers, regardless of their practices, are going to be transparent and allow consumers to choose. Because if consumers don't have the information, how can they choose? So our goal is just to have the information so that you folks can make the choice that you want to make that's best for your family, and move on from there. And hopefully together we can sort of shift the food system further along the spectrum. I see some more questions about specific brands, questions about invisible cracks. Yeah, that can be a concern for if your eggshells have invisible cracks or damage that you only notice after you cook them or as you're cracking them. That can be a concern for foodborne illness. So let your retailer know if you're seeing that, because usually that's an issue of the handling, the shipping, the whatever. Be careful when you're eating eggs. Make sure you cook them fully. You know, all the typical caution there. Someone mentioned Larry Schultz eggs with limited options in your state. Betsy, Larry Schultz is on our list to visit in person soon. So I think they're a pretty good producer, and we will have more information. So keep checking the scorecard. Pete and Jerry eggs, Margie has issues with them not being fresh, black spots in the yolks, thin shells, pale yolks. Yeah, I would honestly let Pete and Jerry's know, let your retailer know that you're having that issue. That is a concern, especially the thin shells. Can be a concern of the hens not getting enough feed or appropriate feed for what they need. The freshness is typically a supply issue. Black spots, could they be blood spots? Because that's not a concern so much. So I'm not sure what you're seeing exactly, but if you need more feedback, feel free to send photos to our Cultivate inbox, and we can at least direct you in a better direction.
Kestrel,
Cool.
what about if people do see blood spots on their yolks? Will you say more?
Yeah, so blood spots are nothing to be concerned about. If you think about what eggs are, they are like the embryo of a chicken, and typically we eat them unfertilized, but blood spots are just remnants of veins and things, and that's totally normal to see. So no concern to eat that. If you see little spots of blood, that's just part of the egg. Same with like little white veiny things, totally normal, and shouldn't be a concern. If you're seeing like actually like black spots, that may be a concern. But sometimes those little blood spots look really dark and black. So I just wanted to make sure that that's what you're seeing. Is if it's blood spots, that's okay. If it's like mold or something, that's not okay, and you need to not eat the egg and reach out to your retailer to let them know that you're seeing that. Are egg whites ever considered a good way to eat eggs? Lisa, we don't necessarily speak to dietary choices like that. I know a lot of folks eat egg whites because you know they're the high protein, low fat part, whereas the yolk is where all the fat is. So it really depends on your individual needs and what you're looking for when you eat. Diane, an organic egg producer, Axel's Pasture Eggs in the Northeast Kingdom in my home state of Vermont, rotates their birds on pasture and feed their hens some organic grains. They source from local organic farms. The quality and taste of their eggs reminds me of eggs over 50 years ago, pre-industrial food. Yeah, small farms produce some of the best food. We agree. And that's a good point, Diane. We do see occasionally small pasture raised producers who do not have organic certification, but still feed their hens organic feed. And those are going to be on our scorecard because they're not not certified organic. But I wouldn't necessarily tell folks to steer clear of them because they can often be really good producers, especially if you're getting them from like your neighborhood community. And we love to see that they're feeding organic grain because there's a lot of pasture raised eggs that do not receive organic grain, and there are specific benefits to getting organic grain because of the massive amount of pesticides and fertilizers that are used in conventional grain production, grain and soy production. So it looks like we answered most of the questions here. Do we want to pass it on?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Kestrel. That was really helpful, and I really appreciated what you have to say. Thanks so much, everybody.